I'm Leonard Riggs, and this is my podcast, From My Head to Your Ears. Today, I'm going to talk about movies in glorious black and white. A lot of people don't like black and white movies. I love a lot of black and white movies. There's just something special about the old black and white films from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and even the 30s. A lot of them became my favorite movies. Of course, I wasn't around when most of them were made, but I discovered them on public television and cable TV stations late at night. And these are just my favorite 4 films and just some of my favorites. So I'm going to take a break and we'll begin our discussion in just a minute. This is Leonard Riggs. This is my podcast, From My Head to Your Ears. I'm Leonard Riggs, and this is my podcast, From My Head to Your Ears. And I'm going to talk about old movies that I genuinely love, dearly love. I find a disturbing trend amongst younger, and maybe not so younger movie watchers, that they don't like black and white movies. Not sure what the problem is there. Black and white movies are a part of our history. So many great movies are made in black and white. So many great film noir classics. My favorite movie, one of my top 5 favorite movies of all time, is The Uninvited, 1944 black and white film classic about a ghost. And these movies were made. There was a certain artistry to black and white films with the cinematography and the use of the best use of black and white filming, the way the cinematographers made their stars look immortally beautiful. Film noir classics, all kinds of great black and white films. I first encountered this movie back in the mid to late 70s. I'm wanting to say 1978, which would put me at probably the summer of 78, would put me at around 11 years old. It was shown during a pledge drive on our local PBS station, WSIU TV, Channel 8, out of Carbondale, Illinois, which is located on the campus of the Southern Illinois University. And they had a really great movie host, Irv Copey, who was a local man out of Royalton, Illinois, and a great announcer and a movie buff. He loved to introduce the movies, and he built them up really well. Kind of reminds me of the people on Turner Movie Classics, which is a great station, a great source for old movies such as this. As a matter of fact, they showed this following movie the other night, which reminded me how much I love it because I couldn't stop watching it. Irv was a genuinely nice man. I had a website called Leonard's View from Walkie Street, and I had a section that was the coolest TV personalities, and I included him, and his daughter had seen it, and she showed him, and he called me and left a nice message on my answering machine. I wished I could have kept that. That was a really proud moment in my life, to come home and hear his voice coming out of my answering machine. Of course, that was many years ago, but I'll never forget that. And it was nice to hear him appreciate what I was doing. I remember the first time I saw this movie, it was a Saturday night. And like I said, it was during the pledge drive, and I'd never seen it, and I'd never read the book that it was based on. And I'm talking about To Kill a Mockingbird. I believe it was made in 1962. So at the time I saw it, it was only 15 years old. So it wasn't a really old movie. It was a recently old movie. It was filmed in black and white, and on purpose. They could have filmed it in color, but I don't think the movie would have been as interesting or effective in color. It was set in 1932, and to me, when I think of that era, it just seems like it was a Depression era, and it just seems like black and white is suitable to present that time, because times were rough, and it kind of made the movie more raw. But what interested me as a child about the movie was it was told from a child's perspective. And it was a universal childhood presented in this movie. Scout and Jim and Dill, they all were kids that I could have hung around with. They reminded me of kids that I did hang around with, where we all played in the summer. And I remember when I was a child, there were several things going on in the early 1970s. For instance, the Manson murders, and we had a kidnapping in town. We had a murder-suicide in town. And looking at that from a child's perspective reminds me of how these children were looking at this trial that was taken on by their father, Atticus Finch, to defend a black man in a very racist time in American history. So I identified with Scout and Jim and Dill, and it was exciting to me to see children going on this adventure with, reality and also imagination with the whole Boo Radley part of the story. And it was kind of a mystery as well with Boo Radley. But I really watched this. I really love this movie. And I remember being really upset at how Tom Robinson was treated and the injustice of it all. And the ending was very bittersweet. And bittersweet being, of course, you've probably seen the movie and you know how it ends, how Tom Robinson's fate played out, but sweet as in how they met Boo Radley, how Scout met Boo Radley, and that was a very sweet moment. Somebody they were scared of was actually protecting them and had protected them and saved their lives. I've kind of given away the end of the movie if you've never seen it. I hope you have seen it by now. But I recommend it highly. If you're a young listener, seek it out. If you haven't seen it, remove all judgment from your head. Remove the fact that it's black and white. Remove the fact that maybe it's not cool to watch black and white movies, or maybe it's not cool to watch old movies. You're missing out. And embrace what this film is presenting in front of you, because it's a really good movie with fantastic performances by everybody involved, especially the immortal Gregory Peck, who is just one of the best actors ever. My nephew actually met Gregory Peck in Branson a few years ago and didn't know who he was. Jay's just a few years younger than me, and he was a waiter while he was in college in Branson at a restaurant, and he waited on Gregory Peck, and he didn't have a clue who he was, and I think Mr. Peck was aware of that and found it kind of amusing. So when Jay called my sister and said, "Hey, Mom, you ever heard of an actor named Gregory Peck?" And she's like, "Jay, yes." I was just like floored that he met him. That was amazing. I live vicariously through my relatives when they get to do cool stuff. I am not a jealous person. I just think it's cool. My nephew got to meet him before he passed. I would love to have met him. I'd love to have a conversation with him, actually. That would have been cool. Talking about especially this movie and a few of the others he was in. For a couple of my favorites would be Boys from Brazil and The Omen. Of course, those are kind of thriller horror films. But To Kill a Mockingbird is very gentle, but it's also very brutal in its depiction of racism. It was a lot of hard lessons were learned by these children in this movie. And I love the scene, and I'll give it away, where there's a rabid dog down the street, and their maid, Calpurnica, I think that's her name. I can't ever pronounce her name. I always have to look it up and sound it out. But their maid is a black lady, and she calls Atticus and tells him there's a rabid dog down the street, and the kids are, watching from the door with her. And their dad comes and come to find out he is a crack shot. He can shoot a gun, and he is known for shooting guns and hitting the target. And they didn't know this part of their father, because at the beginning of the movie, Jim is trying to get his dad to play football for the Methodists, and he won't do it because he's too old. So that's how Jim sees his dad, as old dad. And then he finds out old dad can actually do something like that, shoot a gun. I love that moment when he realizes that side of his dad. And there's a thing with Jim, the relationship between Jim and his father grows during this. You can actually watch the character Jim mature and grow as this movie goes on, because I don't think Scout is still very young, and she's not taking in what she's seeing as much as Jim is, who's growing up before our eyes in this movie. He's seeing this. He's a child, but he's seeing these very adult themes and realizing and understanding what's going on. And it's really just a beautiful movie. And from the opening, the theme song, the music of the movie, the way the soft, gentle music plays while the little girl hums and is coloring, and features all the little things that Boo Radley eventually give them in the movie, and the way the titles are presented, to the opening, the way the lady narrates. The lady is an adult scout, and the way she narrates and what she says at the beginning, it all resounded with me and stayed with me. And back then, you didn't have the convenience of being able to watch a movie anytime you wanted. You just had to wait till it was on TV again. So every time the movie aired, and it wasn't very often, I would watch it. And I think it was many years since the first time I saw it to the second time I saw it. And now I own a 4K Blu-ray version of it. I prefer to own hard copies of movies because I don't like streaming, for the very fact that I don't have a very good internet around here. A lot of stopping and starting, and it's very annoying. I love the fact that they've restored this movie, and I like that it's available for future generations, and you can stream it, I'm almost certain. But if you've never seen To Kill a Mockingbird, seek it out and watch it. To the younger viewers, take the time, watch it with your friends, have a viewing party. It's a great movie. When I was in school, that was required. I got to read the novel in my freshman year in high school in Mr. Huffman's class. And I was so excited that it was required reading that year, because I actually wanted to read the book. And I got to, and he did an oral quiz on the book, and I was acing it. I really, really enjoyed the book, but I love this movie. And To Kill a Mockingbird stars Gregory Peck, and it was made in 1962, and is available on DVD, Blu-ray, and probably most streaming services. So it's very available, and every now and then the Turner Movie Classics shows it. Like I said, they showed it the other night, so it's really available. So check it out if you've never checked it out. It's a classic. I'll be right back to talk about another movie. I'm Leonard Riggs, and I'm back, and I'm talking today about black and white movies that I adore, film noir classics, mostly. And this one is no exception. It came out in 1955. It's based on a novel, much like To Kill a Mockingbird, about a serial killer. And It stars Robert Mitchum and Shelley Winters, and was directed by Charles Laughton, who was famous as the Hunchback of Notre Dame in the movie of the same name back in 1939. This was the only film he directed. And initially, this movie was a flop, and only later became regarded as one of the greatest movies of all time. I'm talking about The Night of the Hunter, like I said, starring Robert Mitchum and Shelley Winters. It's about a serial killer who had killed several women. I believe it's based on a true story. He had killed several women. He poses as a minister with a love and hate tattoo on his fingers. And he's caught, I think, after he steals a car and ends up in jail. Well, he ends up in jail with a man who had robbed a bank and who is set for execution. He's played by Peter Graves of Mission Impossible and Airplane fame. The man who robbed the bank was caught in front of his children, and he gave the money to his daughter and put it in her doll, and swore his son and daughter to secrecy. But while he was incarcerated, he came across Robert Mitchum's character, who found out about this bank robbery and was trying to get as much information as he could out of him. And he ended up finding out where this family lived, and the man was executed. And the children were made fun of by the other children. I think there's a scene where the children are singing Hing, Hang, Hung. It's quite a surreal film, really. But Robert Mitchum ends up out of jail and proceeds to find Shelley Winters and these kids to find this money. So, again, he's under the guise that he's a minister, and he's really just an evil, awful, horrible person. And the son of Robert Mitchum, the son of Peter Graves' character, is very steadfast and will not tell where this money is. He loved his father, and the little girl is very little and a little more, she can't remain silent. But meanwhile, Robert Mitchum moves in on Shelley Winters, who is grieving over her husband, and treats her, romances her, and the people she works for, named the Spoons, run an ice cream shop, and they adore this minister and convince her to marry him or help move along the marriage. Anyway, he ends up murdering Shelley Winters and sinking her in her car, and then convincing the townspeople that she left in the night and she was full of sin. Well, meanwhile, he goes after the children to get this secret out of them, and they end up escaping and jumping on a boat, and they float down the river, eventually landing in a town where this lady takes them in, played by Lillian Gish, the famous silent film star, and she takes in wayward children and kind of fosters them, and she's a good lady. But meanwhile, Robert Mitchum is chasing these children and closes in on them, and it's quite a great movie. It also goes to show you how people can be fooled by people, wolves in sheep's clothing, actually. And the movie plays out almost as like a fable and is very poetic, and done in the film noir style with the shadowy cinematography and great angles, and it's just, like I said, a surreal kind of movie. And actually, the end of the movie ends at Christmas time. It almost becomes a Christmas movie at the end. It's quite an original film and quite stunningly looking, and I'm excited. I can't wait to get the 4K version because I would like to see it restored. I do have the Criterion version, which is strikingly already, but to see it in 4K will be amazing. If you've never seen it, take it, try to find it somewhere. I'm sure it's available on excuse me, on streaming. I'm having a hard time talking, I'm sorry. It's available on streaming platforms like Amazon or whatever. I'm not sure, I'd have to go look, but if not, it's readily available on Blu-ray and DVD. If you don't want the expensive 4K version, just get a cheap version. Do they even rent movies anymore? I don't think they do. I think you can rent them off of iTunes or Amazon or whatever. But anyway, I don't think it's on Netflix. I saw this movie late at night and I was just amazed, by it. Like I said, the cinematography, the performances, Robert Mitchum nailed this role. Shelley Winters plays kind of an ingenue, this poor woman taken in by this evil creep of a man in the guise of a minister. And it became quickly one of my all-time favorite films, and I was so thrilled to find it on VHS in Carbondale, Illinois, at Real Collections at the mall back in when was that, in the 90s? I was so proud to own a copy of that, but finally with widescreen televisions and DVD, getting the letterbox version and seeing the film in all its glory is to really appreciate it. And I would classify this movie as a thriller. Some classified it's kind of like Silence of the Lambs. It's not really a horror film. Sometimes it's labeled as one, but it's more of the thriller genre. Definitely film noir. Definitely a crime movie. It's just really worth checking out. And like I said, one of my all-time favorite movies. So I'm going to take a break here and we'll talk about another movie in just a little minute or so after this musical interlude. I'm Leonard Riggs. This is From My Head to Your Ears. I'm Leonard Riggs, and this is my podcast From My Head to Your Ears, and I'm talking about black and white films that I love, film noir classics, old black and white movies, what have you. I think I viewed this one on late night television. I'm not sure where I first saw it. I know I fell in love with it. It's a romantic ghost story. I believe it was made in 1947. It stars Rex Harrison and Gene Tierney. And it's The Ghost and Mrs. Muir. And Rex Harrison plays an old sea captain that allegedly killed himself in this house that Mrs. Muir, played by Gene Tierney, ends up in with her daughter Anna, played by Natalie Wood, a very young Natalie Wood. Mrs. Muir, Gene Tierney's character, is a widow, and she lives with her husband's mother and his sister, and they're quite bossy, and she wants to set out on her own and ends up finding this cottage and doesn't know it's haunted. Actually she does. When she visits the house, she becomes intrigued by the fact that it's haunted, and she just wants to live there. And she does, and she meets the ghost, and he's quite salty. And he informs her that he did not kill himself, that it was an accident. And they have immediate chemistry, and they kind of fall in love with each other. Eventually, she finds out that her money has run out, and she must find a way to make money, so he convinces her to write a novel with his help about a sea captain. And she gets the novel printed and published and makes money. But in the meanwhile, while she's getting that, she meets a character played by George Sanders, great British actor, who she actually kind of falls in love with, only to find out that he was married with children, and she gets her heart broken. Meanwhile, Rex Harrison's character vanishes from her life after she falls in love with George Sanders' character, and she grows old in the cottage. And I don't want to give the movie away. Look it up, find it. It's such a great movie. Natalie Wood is so cute as a child actress. Of course, she was on Miracle on 34th Street, the original. Grew up to be a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful movie star, and was tragically killed in a drowning in the early 80s, I believe. This movie is very romantic, which I'm not a big romance film lover, but I do love this. This is done very well done. Again, based on a book, and I believe a play as well, if I'm not mistaken. If you ever come across this movie, watch it. It's just one of those movies. I like to watch these movies late at night. I'm more able to get into them when nobody's calling you or messaging you or distracting you, because these movies are made to pay attention to and to really get into. Turn the lights out and watch the movie. Sometimes I can fall asleep to these movies, not because they're boring, but because I love them so much. I relax and doze off, but I hope you don't do that. That's more something that happens to me now more than it did when I was younger. I recommend maybe making popcorn and drinking a beverage while you're watching the movie, so maybe you don't fall asleep. But I really, really love this movie. It's such a classic, and Rex Harrison is one of my favorite actors. Of course, he did My Fair Lady and he played Dr. Dolittle in the movie. When I was a kid, I had a Dr. Dolittle doll, so I knew who Rex Harrison was. He was Dr. Dolittle. So to see him in his prime in this movie and being the leading man type, that was really kind of cool. Gene Tierney is absolutely beautiful. They just don't make women like that anymore, do they? Very classy, wonderful actress. Anna Lee is in this as well. She plays the wife of the wife of George Sanders' character, and she reveals that she is his wife and that she has children, and it's a heartbreaking moment for Mrs. Muir. Anyway, Anna Lee played Lila Quartermain in General Hospital for many years, and she was also in The Sound of Music. She kind of pops up in all these old movies, but the supporting cast is wonderful, and this is just a really nice, wonderful, beautiful film, and I recommend it highly. I kind of am attracted to houses by the sea. It's kind of funny. My fantasy of living in a lighthouse by the sea, I think comes from my love of these old movies. That and the movie The Fog, which is for another podcast. Features a lighthouse with a radio station on top. I've always wanted to live by the sea, and I think that's just kind of a romantic fantasy of mine. I can be silly sometimes, I guess. I'm never going to go there. I'm going to be stuck in Southern Illinois the rest of my life. But that's okay. It is what it is. It is what it is. I'm going to take a break and talk about the fourth and final movie I'm going to talk about in this episode of my podcast. I'm Leonard Riggs, and this is From My Head to Your Ears. I'm Leonard Riggs, and this is my podcast from my head to your ears. And the fourth and final film I'm going to talk about is one of my all-time favorite movies. If you know me, you know that I love The Uninvited from 1944, which stars Ray Milland, Ruth Hussey, and Gail Russell, who this was her first film. And unfortunately, Miss Russell was discovered at a high school, and while she was making this movie, she was not very comfortable with the process of filming. They would give her alcohol to calm her down while she did her scenes. You can't tell in the movie, obviously, but this led to alcoholism for poor Miss Russell, and she ended up dying at 36 years later. I believe she was 19 when she did this movie, 19 or 20. But that's a sad backstory to this film. And that's part of what attracts me to this movie. The backstory, the story itself. This is one of the first movies to feature a real ghost. The ghost was not a gimmick in this movie. It was a real ghost. It was a real haunting. And it's about a brother and sister who come across Windward Mansion on their vacation, and they fall in love with it. Their dog runs inside chasing a squirrel, and they end up inside the mansion, and it's gorgeous. So they decide they have to buy it. They find out it's owned by a Commander Beach, and they find where he lives, and they're greeted by his granddaughter, Stella Meredith. And she's quite friendly towards the couple at first until she finds out they're trying to buy the home, and she tries to throw a wrench in it, but they do end up buying the house, and Ray Milland's character ends up going back to England while his sister decorates the house. He comes back. He becomes smitten with Stella Meredith, and the backstory of the mansion is that Stella Meredith lived there with her mother and father. Her father was a painter, and her mother was named Mary Meredith, this beautiful blonde, very forward-thinking woman, very strong woman. And I guess her father was an artist, and he had a model named Carmel that he had an affair with, and something happened. Carmel and Mary Meredith got in a fight, and Mary Meredith fell from the cliff, and she haunts the house. And as it turns out, this ghost is trying to protect Stella Meredith, and the grandfather doesn't want her going to that house. But as the movie progresses, we discover there's two ghosts, the ghosts of Carmel as well. The model is also haunting the house. Now, who's the good ghost, who's the bad ghost? That's the mystery. It's a very, very interesting film, very well filmed. Again, kind of in the film noir class again. Also, Ray Milland plays music critic slash composer, music composer, and he composes a piece of music called Stella by Starlight, which he obviously was inspired by Stella Meredith. And actually that song became a jazz classic, and a lot of famous jazz singers, even Frank Sinatra, recorded a version of that song with vocals. And I love that. It's the ringtone on my phone. So if you call me on my phone, the theme from The Uninvited plays, Stella by Starlight. I love everything about this movie. The music, the atmosphere, the actors. Everybody was at the top of their game. And there's a lot of things to notice in the movie. For instance, there's a scene where Ray Milland's character visits a little newspaper shop, and he picks up some postcards, and this lady comes in, and she has one line in the movie. I think her line is, "You don't say." But as it turns out, it's Angela Lansbury's mother, who was just happened to be on set, and they decided, she was friends with the director, and they decided to give her a part in the movie. And actually, it's kind of funny now that you look at her, you know, seeing Angela Lansbury later in life. Her mother, she favored her mother quite a bit. So that's something to look for. The sad story behind this movie with Gail Russell's alcoholism, she got in a lot of trouble by having a drunk driving accident and drank herself to death, literally. They found her dead in her apartment, and she had requested Stella by Starlight the night before, as the story goes. It's these little things that make this movie more fascinating to me. There's a great documentary on it on the Criterion Blu-ray edition of this movie, which I would suggest, and it's a really... The documentary is almost as interesting as the film itself. I like the background information. This is just one of those movies I can watch over and over and over and over. I forgot to mention that there's a psychiatrist in the movie that assists Mary Meredith and was Stella Meredith's nanny, I guess, nurse, and she plays a big role in this movie as well. And she's kind of creepy, actually. But she has a key role in the movie, too. Why can't I remember her name? Excuse me. I can't see. Cornelia Otis Skinner is her name. I'm looking at the movie poster. Thank God that was behind me. Cannot believe I couldn't think of her name. I have a friend named Travis Skinner. I always say that's his long-lost cousin. But The Uninvited, definitely check it out. It was aired on Svengoolie on MeTV the other night, which I was really glad. I noticed on Amazon it was being purchased, so I think that airing kind of renewed interest in that movie, and I love it because these movies could fade into non-existence if they're forgotten about, and I don't hope they don't. All these movies are so great and so near and dear to my heart, and I'm pushing 60 years old, and I don't have children, but I would like to one day just show... I have a projector. I'd like to show these old classics to younger friends in my backyard. Somehow that would be so much fun, because I want to keep them alive, and I want to show people how great they are. And to me, if you're passionate about something, it's always fun. For instance, watching a ball game with someone who really loves baseball, that's, it's an added thing to the experience. Watching a movie with people that know movies and learning the behind the scenes and trivia of the film adds to the experience of the movie. My friend Craig Edwards is always very knowledgeable about films. I've mentioned that before. I think he kind of was my dad too was very much a movie lover, but I think Craig was kind of the person that taught me to pay attention to details of movies, and I always appreciate that. We've been friends for almost over 50 years now, I believe. No, approaching 50 years. Yeah, I think we were the second grade. So, yeah, it'll be 50 years soon. If not 50 years this year. I'm not sure. Maybe next year. The mind is soft. Yeah, I wish they would do a 4K restoration of this movie as well. I might suggest that to Kino Lorber. It's worth restoring and keeping on restoring it to pass it on to next generations. It's just really a good movie, a good little movie to watch late at night with the lights out. So many other black and white movies that I love, and maybe in future editions I will talk about them as well. Like I said at the beginning of this podcast, don't dismiss a movie because it's in black and white. Think about black and white photography. It's the same as these movies were created by people who tried to present movies in black and white as artfully and as interesting as they possibly could, with lighting and camera angles and great cinematography. These movies are classics for a reason, and the fact is they're, all these years old and they're still being shown. The Uninvited, again, is on Turner Movie Classics every now and then. I was just thrilled that it was on Svengoolie because they have a younger audience, and I hope that people really enjoyed the movie. I'm going to take a break, and I will be back to wrap this up. Thank you. I'm Leonard Riggs. This is From My Head to Your Ears. I'm Leonard Riggs, and this is my podcast From My Head to Your Ears, and I'm wrapping this up with a little information. Turner Movie Classics is a great source of old movies, and I highly recommend just sampling it every now and then. Every now and then you might come across a great old movie that you'll fall in love with. Don't be afraid of black and white films. Some of the greatest movies ever made were black and white. It's a art in itself to make movies. The film noir classics are amazing. The old actors are amazing. There's nothing like it. It's a great film genre, and it was a great time for movies back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Don't discount movies because they're in black and white. Turner Movie Classics is doing a great service by helping present these movies to new generations. Recently, there was a fear that they were going to fold under or change the format as they were bought out by another company, but they promised they will not change the format. A lot of famous movie directors were banding together to save the channel, or to make sure the channel didn't stray from its format, and people like Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg and all the famous directors of our time, the geniuses, agree with me that this movie or this channel is important, and I hope they continue it, because I would hate to see these movies fade away, because without constantly re-airing them on cable and the likes, I don't think people would just say, oh, that looks like a good movie, I want to watch it. Just based on the title alone, looking for something to watch. Sometimes when you're channel surfing, you come across something, and magic happens where you find your all-time favorite movie, like I did with The Uninvited and The Ghost of Mrs. Muir and To Kill a Mockingbird and Night of the Hunter. I love these movies. I can watch them over and over, and I'm proud to talk about them, and I hope that maybe you check these out if you've never seen them, and I hope that you love these movies as much as I do, because they are fantastic movies. And I'm going to end this because I've talked enough, and I will be back in another episode of From My Head to Your Ears, which is my podcast name. And I'm Leonard Riggs, as I've mentioned many times before. Well, I am, and you're not. Thank you for listening. Always grateful for my listeners. Podcasting is a lot of fun. I'm enjoying the hell out of this. It's hard to find an audience. I do have a small, regular audience. It's hard to promote these podcasts, so I appreciate any promotion you can give me if you can. Otherwise, I'll be promoting myself and driving people insane trying to get them to listen to my podcast. But again, thank you for listening. I appreciate I love all of you. Mwah. All right. I will return again soon with another podcast. Thank you. I'm Leonard Riggs. Good night.